So, what if I told you that you could increase your annual paycheck, whether you're paying yourself or someone else is paying you, by thousands of dollars simply by making one little shift in how you look at what you're already doing? So, this isn't about doing more, it is about shifting how you see what you're already doing. Would you be interested? Have I piqued your curiosity? Then join me in this week's episode of Weekly Momentum, and we're going to look a little bit at your emotional intelligence and how it is connected to your annual revenue so that we can give you a pay raise. Welcome to Weekly Momentum, the podcast that helps you do great work and still finish before 5 p.m. If you want to start your week with clarity, confidence, and a whole lot less chaos, you are in the right place. I'm the Get It Done Diva, and I'm here to help busy professionals do great work without playing catch up every weekend, only to feel behind again by Tuesday. If you feel like you have more things to do than seem to fit into the time you have, this show is your roadmap to change. At the annual retreat that I run in January, I check in with how the ladies are doing as we move through the process. And it's very similar to what we're doing here with Weekly Momentum, but it's on an annual scale. And I'm helping the ladies to really take ownership of their plan, because it's one thing to create New Year's resolutions, but how often have we done that and not really stuck with them? So we were about 3/4 of the way through the process, through the 4 days of the retreat. And I checked in, as I do periodically, with the ladies, and I asked, how is everybody feeling? And some of the ladies were feeling excited and invigorated. And then I came to one lady and I said, how are you feeling? And she said, I feel behind. And I challenged her. I said, are you? Let's take a look at where you think or expect you should be and where you are. And so we went back over together as a group, all of the things that we'd covered, all of the worksheets that we would have completed by this part of the process. And she looks up in surprise and shock and tells me, I've done everything. We are so conditioned to feel like we're behind, that we're not doing enough, that often we'll think that even when it's not true. It was a huge shift for her. And I was really, really glad that it happened at the retreat, because it was an opportunity for me to show her that day after day, week after week, she was telling herself she was behind. And of course, there's going to be some times where we are behind, or we've bitten off more than we can chew, and we definitely aren't where we would expect to be by now. But a lot of the time, our natural tendency is to decide that we are not doing very well or that we are behind, rather than feeling like we're doing great. If we can start to shift that a little bit and really zero in on exactly how we're doing and shift how we feel about it, then we can actually improve our emotional intelligence. Now, if you're not familiar with what emotional intelligence is, emotional intelligence is a lot like IQ, but the initials are U for emotional intelligence. And it is centered around our ability to recognize and understand our emotions instead of IQ being around your intellect. Your emotional intelligence and your EQ score is also elevated depending on how well you use that information and that awareness about emotions to manage your relationships and communicate with other people. And as a busy professional, whether you have your own company or you have a team, communication is really key. Think of EQ almost like your operating system or a software that you have that's running in the background, but it is managing absolutely everything you do. How you feel emotionally about something colors everything. When you feel like you're behind, how do you feel emotionally? You feel stressed out, you feel overwhelmed, you feel afraid that you're not going to hit your deadlines, you feel like you're going to be disappointed or disappointing other people. The emotions color how we show up for everything. 90% of professionals who are top performers in their field have high emotional intelligence scores. The average emotional intelligence score is 75, and a strong emotional intelligence score is 90 plus. Now that we're learning more about emotional intelligence and how it affects leadership and quality of life and communication and productivity, we're beginning to learn ways that we can raise our emotional intelligence in our everyday lives so that we can then communicate more effectively and improve our business. And as I mentioned in the opening of this episode, it has been proven that if you improve your emotional intelligence score by just 1 point, you will increase your paycheck by $1,300. So let's imagine you improve it by 3, 4, 5, 10 points, right? And get to that 90% or higher mark. Not only will you be communicating more effectively, your bank account will be benefiting from it too. When we understand how we're feeling and what's triggering how we're feeling, and we take steps to feel better and to understand our emotions, then we improve our emotional intelligence. So I'm hoping that what I've done right now is motivated you to begin to see that understanding your emotions a little bit better might be something that's worthwhile investing in. And don't worry, this isn't going to be a complicated process. I've got the best tool that I'm going to share with you today that is so simple. As I said, you don't need to add anything else to what you're doing. You're just going to look at what you're doing a little bit differently to be able to tap into this tool, and it's going to raise your emotional intelligence. Also, just FYI, the weekly momentum process, if you've already been doing it and creating a habit out of it, is full of tools that will help you improve your emotional intelligence. Things like the do-over question, the what felt satisfying, and the weekly rewind. All of these tools are helping you improve your emotional intelligence. If you've been watching this podcast for a little while, you've probably increased your emotional intelligence score already just by using the weekly momentum process. So let's take a minute to look at this really nifty tool that is going to help you raise that score even higher. Let's take a look at wins. A minute ago, I was talking about how we always feel behind. And I think, honestly, a pessimistic attitude is more rampant than an optimistic one. A lot of times, people see me and they think, oh, you're just positive. It's just who you are. It's natural. It's part of your nature. It's maybe part of your DNA. But I'm going to be honest with you. Positivity, I don't believe, is in your DNA. I think it is in your environment. And I think that you can control that environment and create a winning one. If I look back over my life, honestly, I've had some really difficult times. And what those have taught me is the importance of celebrating the positive aspects rather than getting bogged down in the negative ones. When I was 19, I tried to kill myself twice. I was depressed. I struggled with alcohol addiction for decades. That is not necessarily the behavior of someone with a positive attitude. So what I have learned to do is fill my well up so that when I need it, I have the positivity, the emotional intelligence to get through the difficult times. You know, I talk quite a lot on this podcast about the concept that it's really hard to learn to swim when you're drowning. You want to learn to swim before you're drowning so that you can move through that riptide that's dragging you down or that difficult situation. So the same is true of emotional intelligence. If you're spending a little bit of time every single day, every week, building up your emotional intelligence, then you'll be able to draw from that when you need it and times are tough. And so when you look at me and think Marianne's just really positive, what I do is I work at that. Every day I get up and I make sure that I get in alignment, I like to call it. I get connected and I feel like I'm present every single morning before I jump into action. How do I do that? Well, what works for me is to take a few minutes to meditate. I use my daily momentum planner, and I journal and I check in with how I'm feeling in the morning. I'm not sugarcoating things. I'm not pretending I'm something that I'm not. I'm being honest about how I'm feeling. And when I start journaling, some days I might be feeling down or overwhelmed or frustrated or angry. But the journaling process that I do in Daily Momentum and with the Daily Momentum Planner and the prompts naturally shift me emotionally and lift me up. So I've built tools like these to help me with my emotional intelligence. The other thing that I do is I will listen to things that lift me up. So I'll find YouTube broadcasts, courses, and programs. I'll listen to guided meditations. I'll read books. I'll fill up my emotional bank account so that I can draw from it when I need it. So if you're feeling like, well, this isn't going to work for me because, you're just more of a positive person, I just want to remind you that we're all in the same boat and we can all fill our emotional well. So let's look at a tool that's going to help you really cut to the chase. And that tool is wins. I remember a time that I had a super busy week and I'd been working towards a conference that I did at the time called Her Story Women's Conference. It was consuming. I had 20 different speakers. I trained all of them and helped direct them and help them write a TED Talk style presentation. And then we did them all together in one day. The first Her Story that we did, we had 20 ladies and we did 10. We had lunch, we did 10 over dinner. It was a mammoth, epic production. And I put the whole thing on my own. It was such a delight. I felt like all of the things that I'd done in my life were coming together in that moment. It was pretty magical. I remember sitting there with my feet up, listening to one of the ladies who I'd worked with for a couple of months, helping them create that presentation, listening to them do their final dress rehearsal with my feet up and thinking, oh, this is why I had my acting background. This is why I have all of those acting classes and trainings. And this is why I love writing. And this is my coaching. This is it all coming together. And that conference was very rewarding. One day I'll resurrect it maybe when the time is right. So it had been particularly busy on top of everything else because not only was I preparing the ladies for the conference and for speaking, I was making sure that we had ticket sales and doing marketing, and we had vendors at the event, and we had sponsors, and we had the venue and the food and all of this. My assistant was helping me, but there was a lot of stuff to do. I was consumed for months, probably 6 months beforehand, with putting on Her Story. So the event was on a Saturday. It went beautifully. And on this Sunday, I was doing my weekly momentum process. And I was writing down what I'd accomplished that week and what had happened and what my celebrations were. And I wrote down a handful of things. And then about 15 minutes into the process, it was like a penny dropped. And I remembered that I'd done Her Story that week. I had completely forgotten something that had consumed me for 6 months, and particularly in the last week, completely forgotten, and was already thinking of what was next in the future, and didn't think to pat myself on the back, to celebrate the accomplishment at all. And I know I'm not alone. I think part of it is that we have a natural tendency to think about what went wrong rather than what went right. I mean, there are statistics out there that if you have a bad meal at a restaurant, you are, I think, 5 times more likely to write and complain and write a bad review than you would if you had a good meal. So we tend to speak up more. It's louder when something's not going right. So we don't tend to take the time to notice often the things that are going well in our lives. And they're crowded out by all the negative noise. And so even when we've done something like I had with Her Story, this huge conference that I'd put on, we forget. And I think the second thing is that we're always moving on to the next thing. So even though we might kind of remember what we've done, we might not celebrate it, we're already focused on what's next. What am I going to do next? I'm looking ahead. It's like we're on the hamster wheel again. So we need to develop a habit, a conscious habit, to pat ourselves on the back. And we need to do it regularly because when we do, what we do is we feel really good about ourselves. If you right now, I want you to just think about 3 great things that you've accomplished in the last week. Just 3 things, little things that you've accomplished. And I want you to notice as you think of those 3 things, how it makes you feel differently after you remember them. If you like, those of you with the planner, take your emotional temperature before you think of the 3 wins that you accomplished, and then take your emotional temperature afterwards and notice if it's gone up. I'll be talking about the emotional thermometer more in other episodes. I also want to remind you, take a little break right now and remind you, if you have not grabbed already the little program that I created, the weekly planning for busy professionals, go get it. It's got all of the pages that I talk about in Weekly Momentum that you can download. It's got a video to help you with each one, and it's got bonus resources in there like the emotional thermometer, 21 questions, and all kinds of great stuff around winning environments and taking score. So make sure that you grab that. It's such a great resource, and it's a free resource for anyone that is a busy professional looking to shift out of the hustle and create a habit of weekly momentum. What you just did when you thought about an accomplishment, which may come easily to you or it may have been hard for you to think of, what you did was you found a win, something to celebrate. And we have wins all day, every day that we just skip over. When you start to acknowledge the positive reviews, the things that are going well, the things that you've accomplished, you improve your emotional intelligence, which then allows you to make better choices in the future, communicate better with other people, and be clearer and more confident in everything that you're doing. And bottom line, increase your bank account and your paycheck. So the easiest way for you to do that is to take a moment. I love to do it at the end of every day and just focus on 3 wins for the day. Now, a lot of people think, well, I don't have that many wins, Marianne. Really redefine what you mean by win. You get a dozen things done, but you only remember the one item that you didn't check off. Does that sound familiar? That drains your energy and keeps you in constant catch-up mode. So you feel like my member at the retreat, behind, even when maybe you're not. Another thing with emotional intelligence is that, like I've mentioned in episodes before, often we're numb. We are on autopilot. We're bypassing our emotions. We're not even noticing how we're feeling. And that's when we can get into trouble. If you don't feel the hot stove, then you're going to keep your hand on it a little bit longer. So if we're not in tune with how we're feeling and we're bypassing that, we can burn out before we've even realized that we're overwhelmed. It may take you a little while to start to notice how you're feeling. To increase your emotional intelligence is to build your self-awareness, to begin to find tools that allow you to tap into and recognize how you're feeling more often. And then also that's going to allow you to be able to communicate better with other people. You'll notice if someone seems angry, and you'll be able to get a little bit more curious about that and feel more comfortable with other people's emotions as well. When you're higher on the emotional intelligence scale, you're definitely going to be able to not get caught up in the other emotions that are around you. And you'll also have that wonderful effect that happens when you step into a room and you feel great. It's magnetic. You've experienced it before where you've been around someone and everyone is just drawn, magnetized to that person. Usually it's because they're really high with their emotional intelligence and they're clear and they're confident and they are in that positive space. And that's what people ultimately want to be around. So when you raise your emotional intelligence, you're also going to notice that you're connecting more with other people, that people may want to be around you, and people maybe that have been avoiding you or you've been avoiding them because you felt kind of down. You're going to be finding that you're going to connect more with the right people at the right time, which will open up new opportunity. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that your brain is actually emotional first and logical second. One of the things about sales, when I teach sales trainings that I love to share, which surprises people, is that when someone is choosing to buy something. Think of the last time you were shopping. Yes, the quality and the warranty and all of the logical stuff is important when you're thinking about making a purchase, especially an expensive one like a car or an expensive piece of clothing or jewelry. However, we actually buy emotionally first. So you're going to decide whether or not you're going to buy something emotionally first, and then you're going to back it up with the logic. So it's emotional first in our brain, it's how we make decisions, and then we think logically. And can you see how if you're not regulating your emotions or aware of your emotions and your emotions are running the show, but you're not actually tuned into what your emotions are, that's when you start buying things to feel better and trying to fill the hole emotionally. And that's when we can get into emotionally purchasing things that later we wonder, why did we do that? It was just a waste of money. When you take a moment to just acknowledge a win, well, in the middle of a busy day, you're not feeling great, you take a minute, you just stop, pause, and say, okay, what can I celebrate that I've done today so far, or experienced, or received? A win can be showing up in many different ways. Then you can go from overwhelmed, maybe to grounded. You can go from distracted to focused. You could go from deflated and burnt out to energized. It's pretty amazing how quickly a win can lift you up. Let me give you some examples of what a win is so that you can grasp how micro and small we're really talking here, okay? You sent an email you've been avoiding. That's a win. You took a lunch break, went out there, sat outside, ate your sandwich, didn't scroll and work at your desk over lunch. That's a win. You set a boundary. Someone wanted you to meet with them after hours or earlier in the morning or during another appointment that you really wanted to keep, and you said no. That's a win. These are all small, little things that we could do every single day. And in doing so, we begin to celebrate our wins. Imagine wins are almost like steps or rungs on a ladder. Instead of thinking that you can only celebrate the win when you plant the flag on the moon, think about all the steps it took to get there. Think about and celebrate as wins just deciding you want to go to the moon, and then gathering up a plan and buying special food to eat while you're in the spaceship. Every step of the way of achieving either your weekly, your annual, your 90-day goals, there are wins to be celebrated that you are missing out on. And it's one thing to acknowledge them in your mind and pat yourself on the back. But what works even better was when you write down your wins, when you celebrate them on paper as well. I hope you're getting the point, because I keep saying this. When you write something down, you anchor it in even more. Because here's the other thing. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Because when you think of a win, you get a boost. You improve your emotional intelligence and you feel better. When you write it down, you feel even better. When you look at that win a week later, a month later, you get all the benefits of it again. It's not like a piece of gum in your mouth that you chew and the flavor goes out. A win actually is like a piece of gum which has flavor in it all the time, and you can experience the benefits, the ripple effects of that win again and again and again. You can mine it for gold. You can milk it. I find wins so powerful that I've built them into every single tool that I've created. You'll find in the Daily Momentum 30-day planner every single day, page 4, where you're doing your daily rewind, you're going to get prompted to come up with 3 wins every single day. I love doing that. It lifts me up every single day. Even if it's not been the best or most productive day, I can always find 3 wins. I also have built them into the 90-day or the 12-week planners here. You'll find sections throughout them where you can write down your wins for each of the weeks and acknowledge them and reflect back on them. So make sure that you're finding a place in your rhythm, in your routine each day, in each week, so that you can improve your emotional intelligence and celebrate those wins that are happening. Now, often people talk about gratitude journals and appreciation, and those are incredible tools that are overlooked. When we are in a state of appreciation, It's been proven that we can't be feeling two emotions at the same time. It might feel that way sometimes because we might jump from one emotion of pure ecstasy to devastation and anger and frustration and joy all within a matter of seconds. But we can only feel one emotion at a time. And so when we find things to appreciate, the effect of that is that it naturally puts us into a state of joy. The reason that tool works so well is because it's an easy way for us to look around quickly and shift how we're feeling in that moment. So appreciation, gratitude journals, really great tools. For me, I prefer wins, and I'll tell you why. It's very similar, but the difference is slight. When you are celebrating wins, it forces you to think a little bit more rather than be on autopilot. I've noticed that a lot of people, when they're saying what they appreciate or what they're grateful for, they tend to run the same list off again and again and again. And when we do that and we're on autopilot, it's not resonating so deeply with us and it may not work as effectively. For example, someone might just be in the habit of, I appreciate my family and my husband and my home, and they might just list off the same things every day. When you have to celebrate wins, you've got to think a little bit more. It forces you to be present and it forces you to really uncover little things that you've done during the day and to rewind over the day. And that makes you more present, which I think raises your emotional intelligence and allows you to shift your emotions much more effectively than simply doing appreciation or gratitude. I want to define wins one last time really clearly so that you can see how massive the scope is of what we can celebrate. We can celebrate all colors and shapes and sizes of wins. They can be financial. They could be an idea that we've had. Yes, an idea that we've had can feel so fabulous that it is a win, especially if you've been struggling to figure something out for a while and then you get clarity around it. That's a win. Creating systems or using systems that help us create more winning environments, building pieces of those systems, managing and getting other people to use those systems, those are all wins. Experiences that we have can be wins. Opportunities that just come to us without us doing anything can be wins. Wins can be personal, spiritual, health related, professional, financial. They can be in any realm of your life. When I say celebrate wins, I'm not just talking about professionally. I want you to start milking every single thing and acknowledging so many wins that it's like they're raining down on you. But not only are you going to feel better, you're going to start to notice that you have way more wins than you ever imagined. When we start to focus on something, it expands. So the more you focus and you acknowledge and you celebrate the things that you are doing, it's going to put gas in your tank and motivate you to be more productive, to be more open to opportunities, and to create even more wins as you step into the next week. All right, now that you're starting to get and understand a little bit more about how powerful wins are, let's weave them into our weekly momentum process. If you're new to this podcast, don't forget to go ahead and grab the weekly planning for busy professionals. It's a little video training series with downloads that I've created and a ton of resources. You can grab it for free in the show notes, or you can go to the website directly, getitdonediva.com, and click on weekly planning for busy professionals. And there's a ton of resources in there for you. Weekly momentum is a 4-step flow. My objective is for you to make it a habit because greatness is a habit, not a hustle. We are shifting out of overwhelm and burnout and busyness and creating the space so that you can be great each week and that you can finish by 5 and take back control of those weekends. And the weekly momentum process allows you to pause and reset before you step into the week. There's 4 steps to the weekly momentum flow. We're going to touch on them right now, but once again, if you want to really dive into them, you want to go ahead and check out the weekly planning for busy professionals program, and it's going to lead you in depth through each of the steps. Step 1 is to rewind. And when we rewind, we'll look back over the last 7 days. There's 7 questions to help you with that in the weekly planning pages. However, today what I want us to focus on is something additional. I want you to focus on wins from the last 7 days. What I want you to do is I want you to set the timer for 5, 10 minutes, and I want you to write down as many wins as you can from the last 7 days. Go ahead and post in the comments how many you came up with. So what you can do is I would sit there, I would write down as many wins as you can. Remember, micro, small, all different areas of your life, as many as you can. And then what I would do is I would look at your calendar and I'd remind yourself what you did. If you use my daily momentum daily planner, I would look through that and find some wins. And I would keep looking and finding as many wins as you can and write them all down from the last week. That way, you're really getting a sense of how much you accomplished, how much positive opportunities showed up, and how much you have to truly appreciate, not just be on autopilot with. So take a moment for step one, rewind, and rewind all of the wins from the last week. And what's fun is you might notice that a lot of the wins may just have shown up without you doing anything, and you can celebrate those things as well. Next up, step two. Step two is where we realign, we plug in to the bigger picture. Because otherwise, if we just look at each week individually, we may end up spinning in circles. When we do step two of the weekly momentum process, we plug back into the bigger vision. I like to look into my 90-day goals and my 90-day projects and remind myself and realign with what those are. When you do that this week, I also want you to think about what wins do you have specifically around your bigger goals. And especially if you have something that you feel stuck with or that is a really big project, if you find some wins that you've had, it's almost like you're greasing the wheels and creating some momentum around something that maybe has felt a little bit stagnant. Often what will happen is as you're doing this, you'll think of something that you could do, and I give you full permission to do this, that would take maybe a minute. Reach out to somebody that you are waiting to hear back from, or that you're just going to put something away. Whatever it is, something quick and easy that you could do. Often when I'm doing wins, I get ideas not only of what wins I've had, but of things that I could do really quickly that I could celebrate. And so I give you full permission to, even as you're writing down your wins around your 90-day goals or your annual goal, to take an action and then get to celebrate it right then and there. So that's how we're going to create a little bit of momentum, even in this reflection and realign part of the process. So start to notice what those wins are and acknowledging that you're moving forward, because we need this sense of accomplishment. I know I say that all the time, but as human beings, when we feel like we're getting somewhere, it inspires us to want to take further action. That's why it's so key that we celebrate those bigger goals as we're making the small steps towards them. And wins is the perfect way to do that. Now let's move into step three. Step three is where you plan. This is the official plan for your week of the weekly momentum flow. And what that looks like is you create a list of your weekly top 10, the things that are most important that you want to focus on this week. Because I know if I gave you free reign, you would have a list of 100. I've been there. I've bought the t-shirt. And I'm not saying that there's not other things that you will do beyond what's on the weekly top 10. What I want you to do, though, is have a limited list of 10 things so that you can focus on those and feel a sense of accomplishment at the end of the week. The plan will also include a weekly goal. That's like your GPS guiding in the right direction, so you can keep that in mind as you move through the week. Now, as we're thinking about wins, here's something that I want you to build into your plan for this week. I almost want you to reverse engineer a little bit. As you write down your weekly top 10, I want you to fast forward in your mind and imagine celebrating it as a win. Can you believe it? Or does your BS monitor go off? How often do we write things down and we don't really believe we're actually going to do them? When we think about it as in the future, and what would this look like as a win? And we can literally train ourselves to feel the feeling that we would feel when we accomplish this item on our weekly top 10, if you can do that, the odds of you actually completing it go up exponentially. So think of your weekly top 10 as potential wins, and maybe quite large. I would imagine that most of the items on your weekly top 10 is a series of wins, micro, small wins, with a larger win, which is the actual completion of that line item. So instead of just writing down goals and being in that wish list kind of mentality, I want you to buy into the things that you're writing down this week and set yourself up emotionally, prepave, use your imagination, and set yourself up to win. The same goes with your weekly goal. You can really feel into that. And what that might do for you is get you to be a little bit more specific. Because if you've written down a goal and then you have to imagine actually achieving that goal at the end of this week, to use your imagination, you have to fill in details. Imagination, it's like a movie. It's got colors and shapes and different characters and sets and scenarios and scripts, right? There's a lot of detail to a movie, and that's what brings it to life. So when you look at your weekly goal that you want to achieve this week, that you want to accomplish, if you have to imagine accomplishing it, notice what details show up and maybe then build that into what you're writing down or how you describe it so that you can hold on to that visual of what it will look like to accomplish it. And you can set yourself up to win this week. The final step of the weekly momentum process is step 4, which is plug in. This is where you plug what you're going to do into your calendar. And also you mentally prepare, which we did a little bit of in the previous step. You want to look at those items on your weekly top 10 and you want to organize your calendar and make sure that you're finding time to do things that you want to do. And remember, wins come in all shapes and sizes. How do you want to celebrate wins this week? Maybe one of the things that you're going to do is you're going to block off times to create that habit of writing down wins at the end of every day. If you're using the weekly planning pages, you'll notice at the bottom there's room for you to write down 3 things that you appreciate or 3 wins at the end of every day. Use that for wins, and you can build that habit of celebrating at least 3 wins every day like I do. So make sure you're creating the space in your calendar for you to have a winning week as you step through it. And that's it. That's your weekly momentum flow. So here's my challenge to you this week. Write down 3 wins every single day for 7 days. They don't have to be deep and big and cosmic. They just have to be real. They have to be small steps that you've taken, micro actions, things that you've received. All of these are wins, and I know that you can find at least 3 every single day. It could be, I got out of bed earlier than I really wanted to. I spoke up at a meeting when there was an opportunity instead of just being quiet. I took 5 minutes and I breathed before I went out for the day. I didn't send a text that I thought I would regret later. These are all examples of things that you may write down this week as wins. And as always, if you want support with this, go grab the weekly planning pages for busy professionals. You are doing more than you think. You are accomplishing way more than you realize. And I can emphatically share from experience with busy professionals just like you, you are not behind. So start today. Celebrate wins. Increase your emotional intelligence. Create momentum. And watch your bank account increase. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this podcast. I drop a new episode every Sunday. I'll see you next week in Weekly Momentum.